Welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts. Mary Mancini joined us of Liberal Radio. Clint Brewer, the editor of the Nashville City Paper, and News 2's contributing political analyst Steve Gill. It's Friday as we tape this, and as this Friday unfolds, the auto bailout plan is dead in the Senate. Bob Corker and the senators last night pretty much shot it down. The White House today is saying they're going to look at it and may take $15 million or so of the TARP money, so it's really still up in the air. And I guess the question is, the Republicans in the Senate are claiming this. They want some more responsibility from the UAW, more responsibility from the automakers before they grant this money. From the Detroit side, they're saying this is an effort by Southern Republicans who have foreign automaking manufacturing ships in their state to break the UAW. So that's where the argument stands. The question is, does something have to be done for the auto industry?
Well, I think the real crux of what blew apart earlier this week with the bailout decision was that the United Auto Workers wouldn't go along with a specific date within which to accomplish these goals. They just want to kind of put it out there with a promise to someday maybe we'll get around to doing this. And I don't think the Republicans or anybody else should have taken that. I think the problem for the Bush White House is their desire to use the TARP money, $15 billion of the financial bailout money, is that the provisions of that bailout specifically limit those funds to go to financial institutions. And the last time I checked, automakers weren't financial institutions.
I don't know if anything has to be done for them. I mean, Tennessee Senator Bob Corker sort of stepped to the fore of this argument. And one point he keeps making is their debt structure is just not sustainable. And then to pile more debt on top of that through the government and through these bailout loans, any investment banker worth their salt can look at this and tell that it's not really a viable deal. So does it have to be done? The market forces can take over, but if you want to save the auto industry, they're going to have to find money somewhere, and they're going to have to change their business model.
Well, there is a date that the auto workers are looking at, and it's when they renegotiate their contract. That's actually what they're saying is just give us that time to work through this. But you also have to look at the level of unfairness where you have a bailout of white-collar workers with barely a blink of an eye of $700 billion. And here they're asking for $15 billion to help blue-collar workers. And the Republican senators are really having a hard time even granting that without any kind of huge concessions from the union. It does seem like it's union busting in some form.
I think part of the problem, though, is that the $700 billion, and we talked earlier this week with Congressman Zach Wamp, the $700 billion was sold under the idea that if we don't do something right now, this weekend, if it's not the full $700 billion, the financial markets in the world will collapse. They still are holding back $350 billion of that emergency money to spend sometime next year when Barack Obama takes over. So clearly they were not honest about that deal, and I think that's also treading over into this one where people just simply aren't going to buy this claim that you've got to do something or bad things will happen.
President-elect Obama has said he thinks something needs to happen, but it's a catch-22 for him. He's not president yet. How much can he really have his will be done, as it were, while this crisis goes on?
I don't think he has, much leeway to get his will done. I mean, he can sort of extend it upon the Democratic Party, but I think they're already on the same page. He made comments today that he appreciated the Bush administration trying to come to the table and make something happen. So I think he can use the bully pulpit, but beyond that, there's not much he can do.
Except people are looking for leadership from an administration where they really haven't been getting any for the past few months, and that's what he's actually able to provide, is a sense of, I'm engaged, I understand what's happening, this is my opinion. He may not be able to enact something, but at least he's putting it out there that he's willing to lead and he understands the issue, which is a lot more than we're getting.
Part of the problem is whatever he says are not going to move cars. I mean, you've got auto dealers that have Chevys, GMs, and these other vehicles on their lots that aren't selling, particularly as they're having to compete with these other auto dealerships. They're not selling those cars. Putting more money into GM isn't going to sell a single car at a dealership in Middle Tennessee or anywhere else. And maybe more money into the pockets of consumers to go buy those cars to start clearing out some of those lots might be the best thing to happen.
It does sound like, though, the Bush administration is going to go against the Republicans in the Senate and do something.
They're going to try, but again, if it is illegal to use the financial bailout money, I think they're caught between a rock and a hard place, and that's why nothing's likely to get done before the end of this year.
Speaking of bailouts, Governor Bredesen was in D.C. this week meeting with President-elect Obama, talking about the need for maybe a possibility of states' bailout. Each state is facing billions in some cases, millions in most cases of deficits. Kentucky about $500 million. It may be $1 billion here in Tennessee. Is that going to be the next arena where taxpayer money comes to bail out the states?
Well, that's again where I'd look at tax cuts as a way to get it. Put more money into the pockets of consumers, then they can go out and buy cars, and sales tax gets paid when they buy those cars. Let's put money back into the pockets of consumers. That's how we'll rebuild an economy, not putting it back into the bureaucracy.
It's ironic that Tennessee is in this state where we would have to maybe go and look for federal tax dollars, and the reason is because of our tax structure in this state. We have a regressive tax structure. We have a movement in this state. We have legislators who are legislating huge corporate loopholes, tax loopholes. We have a movement in the state against any kind of an income tax. It's a feeling that we don't want to invest in this state, that people say, you know, we're on our own. And what you have is, you know, when you pay your taxes, you're investing in highways, and you're investing in the internet, and in science, and in, you know, the airline industry. Our grandparents did it. Our parents did it. They invested in infrastructure, and we can continue to invest in that infrastructure, or we can continue, as Tennessee has, to be in the bottom 10% of almost any measurable metric when it comes to, you know, comparing state by state.
I don't think it's so much a movement against an income tax as it is a cultural predisposition against more taxes.
He would not tell you that at all.
You know, I think that you're right. But I mean, you got to remember, it was a Republican governor who proposed an income tax, and it's the Democratic governor we now have who ran saying, "I will not pass one." So I mean, it cuts both ways across both parties. I think what you're seeing Governor Bredesen do is doing what he can control, which is to develop jobs here. City paper, or rather the Nashville Post, affiliated with our company, part of our company, broke the story about the big plant coming to Clarksville. And that Nashville Post story went up yesterday. Huge amount of jobs, 3,000 jobs, you know, manufacturing jobs, high-tech jobs. There's the Volkswagen deal that went down in Chattanooga. So I think that's what you're seeing Governor Bredesen do, what he can control.
I would point out that both Democrat and Republican governors have always run for re-election saying they're against an income tax. It's after they get in that they suddenly start trying to put one in their final term. And I would point out to Mary that if she'll check California, she'll find that they have property taxes, income taxes, sales taxes, every form of tax you can get. They've got the biggest budget debacle going on in the country. Kentucky has a state income tax just a little north of us. They're in a huge budget crisis. You look across the country, states that have income taxes, property taxes, real property taxes, every form of taxes imaginable, including the income tax, are in worse conditions than Tennessee.
And I would point out to Steve, first of all, that it's Democratic governor, not Democrat governor. And second of all, it's not about big government versus small government. It's about smart government, and it's about what you do with those tax dollars. And I believe there needs to be tax reform, but I also believe that we need to be taxed fairly, and we need to invest in our state. Now, we also need to be vigilant about what our leaders, our elected leaders, do with that money. Again, it's about smart government and holding them accountable to make sure that that money is spent in a way that helps all of us.
Mary Mancini, Clint Brewer, Steve Gill, appreciate your insights. Stay with us. This Week continues in a moment.